Сегодня у нас отличная новость.
Я хотел бы обсудить лаваш.
Это самое большое изменение в поиске Яндекса за последние 10 лет.
Как мы представляем идеальный пользовательский опыт?
Но еще у нас есть специальный курьер, и он не человек.
Трансформеры на самом деле дали нам рекордный уровень в качестве поиска.
А потом случился март.
Ничего себе.
Вы думаете, мы только помидорчики до лавки делаем?
Отличный вопрос.
Что взрослая жизнь –
Это кайф.
Подход какой? Делай хорошо, хорошо будет.
И Яндекс один из таких примеров.
Привет, друзья! Я Алексей Пивоваров, и это не редакция, это Як-2020, большая ежегодная конференция Яндекса. В этом году она проходит в необычном онлайн-формате. Сами понимаете, коронавирус. В ближайшие пару часов мы расскажем и покажем, что произошло в компании за этот год, что происходит прямо сейчас, и покажем несколько важных новинок. Кто мы? Ну, разумеется, сегодня выступят руководители сервисов Яндекса, но главным героем будет управляющий директор группы компании Яндекс Тигран Худовердян. Привет, Тигран.
Привет.
Мы до начала интервью обсудили на «вы», на «ты», решили на «ты».
Мы все на «ты».
А скажи, пожалуйста, а почему я общаюсь сейчас с тобой, а не с Воложем?
Аркадий Волож, сооснователь и генеральный директор группы компаний Яндекс.
Добрый день всем!
Яндекс сегодня, на самом деле, в некотором смысле управляется
новым поколением менеджеров, я один из них.
То есть на сегодняшний день компанией управляешь ты?
Кто управляет на самом деле компанией, непонятно. Вообще Яндексом сложно управлять. Мне кажется, я мечтал быть директором, когда был ребенком. Я всегда это представлял себе, такой кабинет, ты сидишь. Ну, не, про секретарш я тогда не знал, но я представлял, что там стучат в дверь, заходят, задают вопрос, и ты отвечаешь. Мне кажется, многие так представляют, что управление компанией — это вот там даешь команды, и они исполняются. А на самом деле ты дирижируешь оркестром. На самом деле, оркестром оркестров.
Яндекс-конференция ЯК.
Да.
Это не является ли заимствованием формата, у того же Стива Джобса и прочих больших американских корпораций, которые любят такие конференции?
Я думаю, что вот этот формат ежегодного рассказа о чем же мы занимаемся, это возможность выстроить такой мостик между компанией, еще один мостик между компанией и потребителем.
Что такое Яндексоид?
Яндексоид — это такая среда. Не знаю, ты когда-нибудь участвовал в олимпиадах каких-нибудь школьных?
Было дело.
Было. Там мои
Ничем хорошим не закончилось.
Мои воспоминания такие. Ты первый парень на деревне, в своем классе, в своей школе. Такой большой молодец. Думаешь, что лучше всех разбираешься в теме. Приезжаешь там, например, на городскую олимпиаду, неважно, с городской на республиканскую, и ты, в общем, понимаешь, что тут вообще все умнее тебя, просто все вот это твое величие разбивается от того, что собрались сильнейшие. Быть индексоидом — это быть олимпиадом.
Hello, I'm Graham Fitch and I'm bringing you this video demonstration on polyrhythms from Steinway Hall in London, and it complements my article on the subject for Pianist Magazine issue 89. In order to play a polyrhythm, or a cross rhythm as they're sometimes known, we have to be able to divide a beat into equal parts at will, or better, if you're a teacher, you can do this with your students, on instruction. So let me establish a beat. Here we go. I'm going to divide it first of all in two. 1, 2, 1, 2. Now 3. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And do you see how we can do that? We can do that. Hands together. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. With one of these devices, which we're all familiar with, a metronome. That's the first thing we need to be able to do. Let's look at the very simplest polyrhythm of all, and that's a 2 against 3. I'm going to do something rather unusual for a video demonstration on piano playing. I'm going to close the piano up and show you how to do it, first of all, on the full board. We can do it on a table, you can do it on your knees. Doing a 2 against 3 polyrhythm is not difficult, not difficult. What I've got is 3's going in my right hand and 2's going in my left hand. 1, 2, and 3. And you'll notice that the second note of the duplet falls precisely between the second and third note of the triplet. 1, 2, and 3. So if I'm able to do it on here, I can also do it by walking. This is another very good thing to do. Walk and count your footsteps in, let's say, 3's, and clap the 2's. So that would be, okay? And you can do it the other way around. Walk in 2's and clap in 3's. Very good way to feel the polyrhythm in the whole body rather than just in the tips of the fingers. For beginners, this is a good way of doing it. Simply use the black keys of the keyboard. And of course, do it the other way around. Coming back to our scale. So you'll span 3 octaves in one hand and 2 octaves in the other. If you do it the other way around, which I suggest you do, you'll have to start 2 octaves apart in order to avoid the collision that would happen. 4's against 3's are somewhat more complicated because the hands don't align in quite the same way. They're not quite as neat. So if we're closing the full board again and using a rhyme or a sentence, there's 2 I would suggest. One is, pass the golden butter. Do you notice that that stresses the 3's? The strong parts of those words stress the divisions of 3's. pass the golden butter. If you want to feel the fours, and it depends on the circumstance, whether it's a 3 to a 4 or a 4 to a 3, then use the sentence, where did you work today? Where did you work today? And that puts the stresses on the fours. So you can do the whole thing again on the keyboard with the scale. So see what I'm doing there? 4 in the one hand against a 3 in the other. And I like using a scale because we all know our scales at this stage of the game. By the time you're encountering 4s against 3s, you'd better know all your scales. And it's out of the context of the complexities of the piece of music. So it's a very good way of mastering the skill. Let's now move on to an exercise which really does do the job beautifully. And I'm going to change to triplets in the one hand. I'll show you. 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1. Do you see how I'm dividing that up? The 5-finger position, up and down, becomes 4s, and the right hand in this case is triplets. So what I do is I alternate one with the other. And then at one point when I feel confident, I'm going to try it with both hands together. The first time you do it, it'll probably go wrong. Don't immediately go back to the hands together. Go back to the beginning stages. That's really important. It's a little bit like riding a bicycle. You'll fall off several times before you get it right, and then you'll never get it wrong again. So the process for a piece is exactly the same as for that exercise. So if I show you a famous example. Which happens to be a 6 against an 8, which is the same thing as a 3 against a 4. I'm going to use my trusty metronome now. We just establish a pulse and divide it alternately in 3s and then the 4s. Until such time, let me get rid of this, until such time as I feel confident to just try the both hands together. As I said before, it will go wrong several times before it goes right, and I recommend doing it every day for a while until you have got it, and then once you've got it, you'll be able to do it completely without thinking. Now that, of course, was the famous Fantasy Impromptu by Chopin. But you can use that method for any given polyrhythm, where it be it a 5 against a 7 or a 9 against a 4, whatever it is, that process will work. So I hope that's helped you, and I look forward to seeing you again soon.
Как стать разработчиком, если никогда не программировал?
Работал 5 лет на железной дороге, был помощником машиниста и понимал то, что дальше я так не хочу работать.
Хотим обозначить, что сейчас для нас наступает...
Republican Senator Marco Rubio posts a Bible verse on Twitter most every day. Recent ones include messages about respect, humility, loving your enemies. These are important themes, especially in the moment that we're in. But Rubio's daily devotions are often 1-2 punches, accompanied by judgments or attacks. On Tuesday, just before he quoted Proverbs and urged folks not to rejoice when your enemies fall, he went after President-elect Joe Biden's first nominees. He said, quote, Biden's cabinet picks went to Ivy League schools, have strong resumes, attend all the right conferences, and will be polite and orderly caretakers of America's decline. I support American greatness, and I have no interest in returning to the normal that left us dependent on China. Now, there is certainly a debate to be had between Republicans and Democrats on some very key issues that they are facing at this point in time, right? This includes ideologies that guiding each party on policy, and that would include U.S. and China relations. But Rubio is also going after Biden's picks for being educated and qualified and networking with people who know about the fields that they are now leading in. This is what they are now doing, what they're in charge of. It is a rejection of experience and expertise that permeated the Republican Party even before President Trump. And for someone cynically poking at Ivy League educations, Rubio fails to note that Biden will become the first president in 4 decades without one, without an Ivy League education. Add Kamala Harris, and they're the first winning presidential ticket in 44 years without Ivy League stripes. So let's look at President Trump's administration, which for 4 years has been at the helm of the American greatness that Rubio champions. It's full of people who went to Ivy League schools: Harvard, Yale, Columbia, Dartmouth. Trump himself attended UPenn. Jared Kushner, the president's son-in-law and senior advisor whose portfolio constantly eclipses his expertise, went to Harvard. In The Price of Admission, Daniel Golden's book about how, quote, the rich buy their underachieving children's way into elite universities with massive tax-deductible donations, it was revealed that Kushner's attendance at Harvard followed his father donating $2.5 million to the school. Now, the Kushner family denies that there was any connection between the cash and his acceptance. Rubio's chief of staff, though, he went to Stanford Business School. Not Ivy League, but it's the closest thing we West Coasters have to it, and it's arguably as difficult to get into as Harvard's business school. Rubio's former campaign manager taught at George Washington University, and on his bio page, he touts himself as a featured speaker at Harvard. The president himself, who we mentioned, for 4 years has helmed the American greatness that Rubio is talking about in his tweet. He considers his matriculation at Harvard. The president, on his bio page, he touts himself as a featured speaker at Harvard. The president himself, who we mentioned, for 4 years has helmed the American greatness that Rubio is talking about in his tweet. He considers his matriculation from the business school at UPenn among his greatest accomplishments, even 50 years after graduation.
You know, I went to the Wharton School of Finance. Nice student. That's very smart. You know, Ivy League school, great, the best business school, I think. It's one of the hardest schools to, even in my day.
I went to an Ivy League college. I was a nice student. I did very well. I'm a very intelligent person.
You know, I'm an Ivy League. I went to an Ivy League college. I went to the Wharton School of Finance, which is the best business school in the world. I'm like a smart person.
We have people running this country who are stupid. They're stupid. I went to an Ivy League school. I'm very highly educated.
Now, Rubio's dig at Ivy League schools is actually an attack on elitism, which is a conversation that can be had. But this is with education standing in as the punching bag. It's a safe bet. Only about 1/3 of Americans have a 4-year college education, according to the most recent census figures. White Democrats are considerably more likely to be college educated than white Republican voters. And as Democrats have struggled to bridge that divide for years in a very real way, Republicans, even Ivy League educated ones, have tried to exploit it.
We have a president who I think is a nice guy, but he spent too much time at Harvard, perhaps.
I didn't learn about the economy just reading about it or hearing about it in the faculty lounge at Harvard.
Now, ironically, Mitt Romney spent more time at Harvard.
economy just reading about it or hearing about it in the faculty lounge at Harvard.
Now, ironically, Mitt Romney spent more time at Harvard than Obama did. He was a businessman, but he earned 2 Harvard graduate degrees to Obama's 1. And of the 1,300 students in Romney's class, only 15 earned the joint degree in business and law that Romney did. 3 of Romney's sons also went to Harvard. Among the Republican political elite, it's not real, this outrage about being educated. It's often just cynically feigned to score political points at the expense of the good of the country. Take coronavirus, where scientists say that wearing masks and living temporarily with common sense restrictions will help keep our fellow Americans alive. We get this from the Republican governor of South Dakota, where there are no restrictions in place and where 43% of the tests came back positive last week, according to Johns Hopkins.
We are not and will not be the subjects of an elite class of so-called experts. We, the people, are the government.
Now remember this, as Governor Noem fans the disdain of spending one's life devoted to learning about something. She doggedly pursued her own college education years after it was interrupted in her 20s when her dad passed away and she had to take over the family business. She reportedly received intern credits for serving as a member of Congress after she was elected in 2010, which is perhaps the best internship ever. And she spoke at a South Dakota State University. Reportedly received intern credits for serving as a member of Congress after she was elected in 2010, which is perhaps the best internship ever. And she spoke at a South Dakota State University commencement even before she had graduated from the school in 2011. Her education meant a lot to her. There used to be an intellectual center on the right, espousing principles which you may or may not agree with, individual responsibility and limited government. And it was the basis for an actual debate in the country on how to govern America, on what America can achieve with its influence. Increasingly, Republicans in power have banished their own principles, and instead they're focused on what? Tearing things down, like education, expertise, science, facts that will keep Americans safe. How can America have a reasoned policy debate when some members of one party, many members of one party, have said coronavirus is a hoax, when they won't acknowledge reality, like Senator Rubio, who has not yet acknowledged that Joe Biden won the election. Rubio attended a fine 4-year institution himself, the University of Florida, and he takes a cheap shot at people who have a very important job, too, who are only now receiving their first transition briefings in the last day because President Trump and most Republicans haven't acknowledged that they won the election, unless you plan to do that today, Senator Rubio. I want to talk now with CNN political commentator Essie Cupp, who is joining me. And look, full disclosure, Essie, you are a graduate of Cornell University, an Ivy League school.
I apologize. I am.
Congratulations. What is your reaction to this? Because on one hand, there's a conversation to be had about elitism, but this tweet really appears to be taking aim at expertise and education as well.
Well, it's just so dumb. I mean, as you point out, Marco Rubio is reliably good for a self-own, as he was in this tweet. But the more important point I think that you allude to is this anti-intellectualism, anti-expertise, anti-experience project.
Tweet really appears to be taking aim at expertise and education as well.
Well, it's just so dumb. I mean, as you point out, Marco Rubio is reliably good for a self-own, as he was in this tweet. But the more important point I think that you allude to is this anti-intellectualism, anti-expertise, anti-experience project that has been cloaked in conservative populism over decades has, I think, become hackneyed and kind of lazy, but also demonstrably dangerous, especially right now during a pandemic. We have seen what a lack of expertise means in real lives. So I think now is exactly the time that you'd want people who know what they're doing. That does not have to mean they come from great educational backgrounds. It has to mean that you have the right people in the right jobs. Ben Carson, very smart guy, has done very little in housing and urban development because presumably he has very little experience in housing and urban development. Rex Tillerson, a very smart guy, an engineer by trade, was probably not the right guy for Secretary of State. So it's about finding the right people, and I think that's what Joe Biden's committed to, regardless of Marco Rubio's dumb swipes.
And maybe understanding, you know, what average Americans are going through, right? What are working class Americans dealing with? This is something that Democrats do need to grapple with. They did cede some of that territory in when Hillary Clinton lost. And I mean, can you speak to that a little bit? Because this is an important debate to have about being out of touch or understanding what people are going through.
And that can happen regardless of your education. And we saw some of that in the Obama administration, talking over people, talking down to people. Barack Obama was very famously accused of that when he said during his campaign of people in the middle of the country who cling to their guns and religion. That didn't go over well. So that is real, but it has nothing to do with someone's background or education. And slamming someone for having gone to an Ivy League school just sort of as an ad hominem attack is really, it's, again, there's not a better word for it. I know I went to an Ivy League school. It's dumb. It really is just dumb.
That's a simple Ivy League word. And then real quick before
the best ones.
They are. Okay, real quick before I let you go, this talk about whether a Republican would serve on Joe Biden's cabinet. I mean, what's your thought on that? Who might this be? What do you think would be a good fit or a good candidate?
I think you'll definitely get one or two. I think John Kasich's a good bet. Jeff Flake might end up in there. Cindy McCain, who obviously is the widow of one of Biden's closest friend, John McCain, I think is a good bet. I mean, I wouldn't look past her.